Hello, I'm Ron Strickand. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm providing some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular installment is one of several that I'm producing for a survey in British literature. And this webcast is the first one of two in which I'll be saying some things about Joseph Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness. Conrad was born in 1857 in what is now the Ukraine, which was then part of Russia and had been part of Poland. He died in 1924. Conrad was orphaned at 12 years old, but he became well educated in boarding schools in Krakow and in Switzerland. At the age of 17, he ran away and joined the French Merchant Navy. Then, just before his 21st birthday, he joined the British Merchant Navy. He served in the British Merchant Navy for 18 years. In 1886, he adopted British citizenship, and when, in 1894, he decided to become a writer, he decided to write not in Polish nor in French, but in English. I see Conrad as a modern writer and even a modernist writer. Though he was writing at the end of the 19th century, he doesn't share the same kind of appreciation for the values of European civilization that one finds in Kipling, for example. Instead, Conrad has more affinities with those high modernist writers of the period just after World War I, the 1920s, when a general malaise set in and a general disenchantment with Western civilization took hold. Conrad's typical themes include critiques of the moral bankruptcy of modernity, as revealed in the excesses of capitalist greed and colonial exploitation. In Heart of Darkness, Conrad's protagonist, Marlowe, is radically alienated from his contemporary European society. This sense of alienation, but also helplessness in the face of the moral decline of modern European society, is also characteristic of other modernist writers. Although Conrad's narratives typically stem from his own personal experiences, his stories are not simply autobiographical, and they're not simply realist fiction. The editors of the Longman Anthology of British Literature, Kevin Detmar and Jennifer Wick, turn to the critic Ian Watt to describe Conrad's fictional effect. They write, Conrad's experimentations in works like Heart of Darkness result from his own personal experience, a personal experience of travel, exile, and solitude that was a radical premonition of the conditions of modernity. And they go on to say, in Heart of Darkness, events cast a visual glow and haze where meaning can be found only in the most subtle shades and ambiguous highlights of language. The reader must participate in the gradual and partial process of accumulating meaning. Heart of Darkness involves a story that the narrative protagonist, Marlowe, tells about a freshwater voyage, traveling up a river instead of out on the open seas. The novel is structured in three parts. The first part begins with a framed introduction that sets the tone for Marlowe's narrative, then describes how Marlowe happened to take this job and describes his journey to get to the mouth of the Congo before going up the river, ostensibly to rescue the ivory trader Kurt. Then the second part involves Marlowe's experience while he is delayed at the mouth of the Congo waiting for his steamer to be repaired. Then the third part involves his journey up the river to Kurtz's station and then back down the river with Kurtz, ending with his courtesy visit to Kurtz's fiancée after Kurtz's death. Now let's look at the frame narrative, the passage from the beginning that Detmar and Wick also cite. The yarns of seamen have a direct simplicity, the whole meaning of which lies within the shell of a cracked nut. But Marlowe was not typical, if his propensity to spin yarns be accepted. And to him the meaning of an episode was not inside like a kernel, but outside, enveloping the tale, which brought it out only as a glow brings out a haze, in the likeness of one of these misty halos that are sometimes made visible by the spectral illumination of moonshine. The narrator of the frame narrative at the beginning of the story sets the tone and the context for Marlowe's tale. A group of old friends, business associates, a lawyer, an accountant, the narrator of the frame narrative himself, and Marlowe, the only one who still follows the seas, sit on the deck of a yacht in the Thames, waiting for the tide to come up as the sun sets and the fog thickens. The narrator begins to think of all the men who have gone before on ships out this river into the ocean. He mentions Sir Francis Drake, captain of the Golden Hind, a heroic privateer or pirate who attached Spanish ships returning from the Americas, stealing their gold and delivering the bounty to Queen Elizabeth. But note the ambivalent character of this example. Sir Francis Drake is a hero, but also a thief and a slave trader. Conrad's narrator seems to be setting a tone of melancholy, regret, perhaps repentance about the driving force of adventure and conquest, which, after all, is driven by greed and lust for power. Only after this tone and context have been established does Marlowe begin to speak. And this also, he says, must have been one of the dark places of the earth. He's referring, of course, to Britain itself and to the experience of the Roman soldiers who would have come there, sent in AD 43 to take possession of the island. Marlowe can sympathize with such a man. Imagine the feelings of a commander of a fine trireme in the Mediterranean, ordered suddenly to the north, run overland across the Gauls in a hurry. Imagine him here, the very end of the world, a sea the color of lead, a sky the color of smoke, a kind of ship about as rigid as a concertina, and going up this river with stores or orders or what you like. Sandbanks, marshes, forests, savages, precious little to eat fit for a civilized man, nothing but Thames water to drink, here and there a military camp lost in a wilderness, like a needle in a bunch of hay, cold, fog, tempest, disease, exile, and death. Death skulking in the air, in the water, in the bush. Or, Marlowe says, imagine the situation of some young citizen in a toga, perhaps, someone who has lost too much money playing dice and has to come out here to mend his fortunes. Land in a swamp, march through the woods, and in some inland post feel the savagery, the utter savagery had closed round him. All that mysterious life of the wilderness that stirs in the forest, in the jungles, in the hearts of wild men. There's no initiation either into such mysteries. He has to live in the midst of the incomprehensible, which is also detestable. And it has a fascination, too, that goes to work upon him. The fascination of the abomination. Imagine the growing regrets, the longing to escape, the powerless disgust, the surrender, the hate. Marlowe can well imagine the experience of the Roman soldier or the decent young citizen because, as his tale will reveal, their experiences must be similar to his own experience in Africa. Marlowe begins his tale by describing how he was jobless and ashore, and one of his aunts helped him find a job. Marlowe describes being ashore, in between jobs with nothing to do, and how one of his aunts intervened to help him find a job as the captain of a ship sailing up the Congo. Marlowe describes going to the job interview in a city that always reminded him of a whited sepulchre. The city is not named, but I always imagine it's Brussels. Here are images of characteristic architecture of Brussels and an image of a medieval sepulchre. The connotation of death is hard to escape. Of course, the company's headquarters would have been located in Belgium because at the time Belgium was a European colonizer in control of the Congo, and under King Leopold, the Belgian Congo was noteworthy as being an especially brutal regime, even when compared to the other European colonizers in Africa. Marlowe describes his impressions of the company's offices. The streets are strangely silent, no sign of business being conducted. Two women sit knitting in the outer office. They seem to have no purpose other than guarding the door. They symbolize the fates of classical mythology, who spin out the yarn of each man's life and decide where to cut the thread. Marlowe reflects often Far away there I thought of these two, guarding the door of paradise, knitting black wool as for a warm pall. Ave, old knitter of black wool. Ave, morituri te salutant. Those who are about to die salute you. Not many of those she looked at ever saw her again, not half by a long way. Then Marlowe meets the boss, about 5'6", with his grip on the handle end of ever so many millions, Marlowe says. He murmured something vaguely, was satisfied with Marlowe's French, bon voyage. Just like that, Marlowe's back out in the main office, where he has to sign some documents for the company's secretary. He undertook, he believes, not to disclose any trade secrets. And trade secrets will be a recurring theme in the novel. Then Marlowe has one last appointment at the company headquarters. He has to meet the company doctor. And this is a very comic scene. The company doctor is not so much concerned with Marlowe's fitness for the job as he is with measuring the size of Marlowe's cranium with a craniometer. The doctor seems to be conducting some research to try to figure out just what kind of a fool would take a job such as this in the first place. That's a good place for me to end here. I'll pick up my discussion of Conrad's
As always,
business
if you have questions or comments, send me an email.